morning. It is Wednesday, December 31st, 2014, but not for long. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, the Palestinian resolution fails to pass at the UN Security Council. We take a closer look at why with former head of the Israeli Internal Security Services, Ya'akov Peri. Search teams locate the crash site of a missing Air Asia jet and begin the painful job of retrieving bodies. And later on the show, what was the year that was? In politics, environment, economy, and culture, we rounded up for you in a special panel with the best of them. Good morning, I'm Yael Levi, and welcome to I-24 News Morning Edition, special end of the year morning edition. Today, as the Palestinian Authority fails to pass its resolution on ending Israeli occupation of the West Bank, we welcome to the studio a man who spent the bulk of his career in the service of Israel's security establishment, an establishment that many will argue is responsible for many of the ills of the Israeli occupation. Ya'akov Peri served as head of Israel's internal security agency, but when he took the plunge into politics with Yair Lapid's ATID party, he chose to pursue the path to pragmatic peace. He served as Minister of Science, Technology, and Space as of late, and had a seat in the security cabinet that makes most of Israel's top defense-related decisions. That is, until his resignation, along with other members of his party, earlier this month. First of all, I'm very honored and grateful to welcome Mr. Ya'akov Peri here to the studio. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Yael. Good morning.
We're going to touch on the issue at hand today, and that is the UN Security Council that has rejected the Palestinian draft resolution that calls for a peace deal with Israel within a year and an end of the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories by late 2017. Now, the resolution failed to achieve the 9 votes majority required to pass. 8 countries voted in favor of the motion: China, France, Russia, Argentina, Chad, Chile, Jordan, Luxembourg. 2 opposed, the United States and Australia, and 5 abstained: UK, Lithuania, Nigeria, Korea, and Rwanda. It comes as no surprise to many in the international arena that the resolution failed to achieve the 9 votes required, but many will also argue that the motion itself achieved the effect the Palestinians wanted. And that effect, Mr. Peri, is basically to show the international arena that they have no other resort but to turn to the international stage. You were in this government of late that's about to go to elections. This push that Kerry had, the 9-month time limit, why do you think that negotiations, this umpteenth time of negotiations, this time around, failed with the Palestinians?
First of all, Yael, we are really satisfied from the outcome. And that says or indicates that the only place for such a negotiation is the table negotiation. It's not what the Palestinians are trying to do, to throw it to the international arena. Is it the UN? Is it the International Court in Hague? That's not the way, and I'm really happy that the international...
Was there a major concern at a certain point that it was going to pass?
No doubt. I mean, you can see how the whole world, parliaments, is it in the UK, is it in France, is it in Sweden, are passing. Even sometimes they are claiming, well, it's, you know, just symbolic. But it's not symbolic. It's a trend. And the Israeli image outside and the fact that Israel is called peace refusal, etc. Now, but
that's not just to blame on the European support of the Palestinians. Many will argue that also Israeli activities and motions over the course of the last several years, ergos, every time there's a prisoner released, there's a big push for settlement construction, doesn't show good faith, does it?
No doubt. Yeah. No doubt. I think that the first issue that we have to put on the table or to raise is the fact that there is the complete lack of faith between the two sides. And I think that's one of the main reasons that the 9-month negotiations and rounds before that failed. The bilateral route between Israel and the Palestinians have been failed till now. Right. That's the reason that I'm supporting for the last 3 or 4 years the regional
peace initiative.
I think that mainly after Protective Edge, we came to an historical chance to call for, to initiate a regional conference and to put inside the regional conference the bilateral negotiations with the Palestinians. I
want to ask you about Protective Edge, because when you say there was a great opportunity after Protective Edge, is that because, I mean, Protective Edge was Israel versus Hamas, and Abu Mazen actually on the side was himself opposing Hamas. And what opportunity lost do you mean that the regional Arab countries were actually supporting Israel? I know that's something that many people are saying.
Well, I couldn't go so positively and say that they are supporting, but Israel, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the majority, maybe the all Gulf countries, even the Palestinian Authority are sharing at least two main interests now. One is the anti-Iranian, and the second one, the anti-radical Islam. Right. What's going on around us. And that's a huge opportunity to call for a conference and not to put it in a time limit. I think that one of the main mistakes in the last round between us and the Palestinians was the fact that we have framed it to 9 months. We are not in a hurry. We are in a hurry because we have to come to a settlement. But if the settlement on irrigation will take 12, 15, 2 years, on 3 years, that's not the point. We have to build a very solid infrastructure of faith, of talking, of understanding each other.
That's beautiful, and amen to that. But when you said that we are not in a hurry, I'm assuming that's the Israelis, and no one will argue that Prime Minister Netanyahu, of course, is in no hurry. Many will argue that the status...
He's not in a hurry at all.
At all.
And that's one of the main issues, because if Israel will initiate, what will happen 2 days after the Israel initiation, the whole world will support. The whole world will be with us. We have saw it in the past, during Olmert's regime, during the Rabin Oslo Accords. Right. The image nowadays of Israel is that Israel is a peace refusal country. And we are holding almost 4 million Palestinians under an occupation, which is liberal, which is
but isn't it true that they are under occupation? And
yeah, it's a fact.
It's a fact.
You cannot deny it.
Argue it.
You cannot deny it. You cannot
yeah.
deny it. So, first of all, after a protective hedge, Mr. Netanyahu declared there is a new political horizon. And it was only a declaration, to my sorrow. We are going to lose that chance as well, because what's happening in our region, around us, is it in Syria? Is it in Iraq? Is it in Lebanon? Is it in Egypt? Is it in Sinai? Are not issues that are going in favor such an initiate. And we are going to lose that chance as well.
And I'm asking you because right after Protective Edge, I think it is you, with your extensive and quite distinguished, security and background, you drafted a paper.
Right.
A 3-page paper.
Right.
With a proposal to Prime Minister Netanyahu of this is the time to go for a regional initiative. What was the response to that paper?
Very positive. When we have been in Four Eyes and when I talked about it in the Security Cabinet, the response was very positive. And that was, to my sorrow, very frustrating to see that it's not going to work, or the Prime Minister is not going really to initiate it. And then I came with a backup proposal which said, if Israel is hesitating, call Mr. Sisi, the president, the Egyptian president. Let him call for it, and we will join him. And it doesn't work as well. I mean, nothing moves. So, to my sorrow, we have to...
And I'm wondering with you, because throughout the, you were Minister of Science and Technology and Space with YESH ATID, and within the current very short government of Prime Minister Netanyahu, you are actually one of the champions of Netanyahu out of your party. You weren't somebody who was criticizing him. You were actually, when I read interviews with you, you had faith in him, that he's the one who can lead peace. And yet 2 weeks ago, you argued that you made a mistake, which is something you'd rarely hear from a politician in Israel, I have to say.
I admit fully, I backed up Mr. Netanyahu. I know Mr. Netanyahu for the last 20 years. He's a very intelligent, a very bright fellow, and you can talk about him, but that's not the point. And I thought at this term of the last government that Netanyahu has changed, that he came to the conclusion that it's a strategic issue for Israel to come to a settlement. And hear me well, I am not talking about peace. I am talking about a settlement.
A settlement.
To start with a settlement, peace will come, probably with the next generation. It's a long, blood-shady conflict. And that's when I'm calling don't hurry, don't frame it. Build it layer by layer and it's doable, and it's possible.
Well, when you say a settlement, we're talking about a Palestinian state within that settlement.
No doubt,
yeah.
no doubt.
Okay.
No Arab country will come to the table or talk without a kind of a precondition which says Palestine is in. And I say, why could we put the bilateral negotiation inside the conference of the region? Because the Palestinians, it facilitates to the Palestinians to be backed by the dominating Arab countries in the Arab world, right. And they will back economically as well. And I think it can work, and it's not too late.
Just, on that initiative, and it's fascinating, do you think it can work, though, for the Arab regional countries to accept Israel, of course, within the context of a settlement with the Palestinians, but isn't Israel also something that's always used as rhetoric in the Arab countries, as rhetoric as to gain support to certain regimes? I mean, is it really possible to convince the region to accept Israel as a fait accompli?
I'm not going to urge that it's going to be an easy cake. But it's possible. It's possible because the ruling parties, and I'm not talking about the street. The street will be another issue. We have quite a strong opposition in Egypt, which holds with Israeli peace treaty for many years. Inside Jordan, there is an opposition, but the ruling parties all over the Arab world, the majority of the Arab world, are convinced that we have to come to a compromise. We have to come to a satellite, to a kind of a solution that will enable this region to be heaven instead of what we're witnessing right now, sadly, at the end of 2014. I want to ask you about that when it comes to Israel, because, looking at your career, it's so distinguished when it comes security-wise. And security seems to be also, the modus operandi of Prime Minister Netanyahu when it comes to, why we cannot sign anything, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think the Israeli public is ready for settlement and is accepting it? Because if you look at how the Israeli public has been voting over the course of the last years, they are buying the security issue. The Israeli public is grabbed too much towards the what we are calling to the right wing. But I can even sign, I can give you even an assurance that that of the Israeli public, if an Israeli leader, an Israeli prime minister, an Israeli government will say, we are going to sit, we are going to talk, we are going to settle, we will gain a majority. I don't want to say if it will be 65% or 72%, but for sure, Israelis are, I would say, sick of the situation we are living for the last decades. And we are not going to lose anything. On the contrary, our international status, the economical status, investments in Israel, tourism, you name it, will bloom.
And when it comes, though, to convincing the Israeli public of that, I think it's no secret that these upcoming elections, everybody's calling them the Bibi elections or the right-to-left elections, you came out strongly several weeks ago saying that the party, the ATID party, which you're part of, is going to definitely support any kind of center-left bloc that is going to, be formed after these elections.
Yeah, I'm always giving the example of a football team. When a football team loses, we are not changing the players, we are changing the coach. And we have to change the coach. We have to give the leadership to people who are convinced and have the right courage to do what is needed in the political and the peace process arena, in the cost of living, in the social economy. What happened last 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago? Yesh Atid was on the edge of passing a new budget, the budget of 2015, a housing program, which was a debate of, but it's okay, it's a democratic country. Right. But it's the most social budget ever done in Israel. More than 10 billion shekels to education, to health, to welfare. More than 1,200 policemen and security guys. And Mr. Netanyahu probably, and he has the right senses. He is a very shrewd politician. He understood that YESH ATID is on the edge of a success. So we are going to unnecessary elections. That's the outcome. No,
and that's and the question to you, because many say within the political arena that actually YESH ATID was played by Prime Minister Netanyahu, that he created this situation where, you know, the party is losing because Yair Lapid was the white knight on the horse in the last elections, and that Netanyahu created a situation where he basically set the party up to fail.
You can look at it like that. We are not such idiots. I mean, but we came without a political experience. We didn't do manipulation. We came to work. We came to change priorities. And the fact that we didn't succeed in 100% of what we have planned and what we have promised is, of course, we'll have to explain, but the real outcome is caused by Mr. Netanyahu and his party, and it's a shame because we came to do the best for the people of Israel, not for ourselves.
Question to you about the people of Israel and the region as we are looking, you know, we're finishing 2014. This is the, we've got several hours left of this year that was sadly very bloody on many fronts all around the world. What do you think are the dangers for 2015 when it comes to Israel? Because are we looking at, I'm talking about protective edge, which seems to not have been really concluded in any ways.
Well, unfortunately, there are so many risks from all directions. If you are looking for the north, the Hezbollah is sitting on the border. Hezbollah has nowadays 110,000 rockets from all kinds. Some of them are really bad ones.
Yeah.
We have the ISIS, Daesh, the rebels in Syria, out from Syria. We have from the Sinai, Al-Qaeda, which is well dealt by the Egyptian, but still a terrorist, a cruel and brutal terrorist organization. We have the Hamas. That's from the security. And we have also problems and tensions inside Jerusalem, and we have seen inside the Israeli Arabs, and it's quite a problem. That's from the security points. Right. From the economical points, if you are not passing a budget, there is no growth. If there is no growth, you know, it's a limited budget. You cannot do anything in order to really go on the cost of living. You have the housing problem that it's stuck. The government will not have at least an hour from a year from now any budget. So the risks are, I mean, in the room.
Speaking of, and just really quickly to culminate that, do you think we're looking at another confrontation with Hamas in the next several months, or where?
Nobody can give a real forecast when it will happen, but no doubt that the Hamas is preparing himself.
Sadly, on this not very optimistic note, but that said, Ya'akov Peri, I want to thank you very much for being with us. I think it's always refreshing to meet a politician that actually can admit certain things, and that was quite an honor.
That's our new politics, and I want to wish our spectators a Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, completely. Do stay with me as I move to the other story. Thank you. Sadly, we move to the discovery of the wreckage of the AirAsia plane that went missing 2 days ago. Yesterday's search teams spotted floating debris in the sea, which turned out to belong to the plane itself. Now, after the location of the plane was discovered off the coast of Borneo, divers began fishing bodies and wreckage from the sea and transferring them by helicopter to the Indonesian mainland. The Airbus A320-200 lost contact with air traffic control early on Sunday during bad weather on a flight from the Indonesian city of Surabaya to Singapore. The plane, which did not issue a distress signal, disappeared after its pilot failed to get permission to fly higher to avoid bad weather because of heavy traffic. Let's watch the following report that recaps the latest events and take it from there.
These images from the AirAsia carrier, presumed to have crashed in the Java Sea, sparked outrage and grief in Indonesia Tuesday. Families of the victims of Flight 8501 were shocked when live views of a floating body aired on Indonesian television. Statements made on the same day by Indonesia's security officials left little room for hope that the passengers may still survive. On Tuesday, the Indonesian Navy said 40 bodies were recovered so far.
From our findings, as the Chief of Search and Rescue, I can say that there is a 95% chance, judging from the location of the debris, that it came from the plane.
Just one day after Indonesian security officials said the plane, which went missing on Sunday with 162 people on board, was likely under the sea, debris found in the water around 100 miles off the coast of Borneo Island are confirming their estimates. Following the findings, AirAsia CEO addressed the media on cooperating with the families.
They believe that with their presence, with their prey of the next of kin, that would help the search and rescue team.
According to newly released reports, unconfirmed secondary radar data from Malaysia suggest the aircraft was climbing at a speed of 353 knots, about 100 knots too slow, and that it might have stalled, potentially causing the crash. But the jet has yet to be found.
Joining me in studio to discuss, sadly, this tragedy is Avraham Kimchi. Good morning to you. He's a senior investigator for Israel's Aviation Authority. Thank you for being with us, Avraham. Seems to be a daunting mission to try and salvage this wreckage. But at the end of the day, you know, when wreckage as such is found at this point, and we're hearing this morning that I think, you know, sonar is looking for the plane at the bottom of the sea. How does something like this, I think everybody's wondering, let's start by that, bad weather can put a plane down?
Oh, so many reasons that can bring a thing like that.
I'm asking this because, you know, whenever we're on plane, and I'm speaking like every, you know, I want to say naive passenger, they tell us the turbulence is not going to cause harm. You know?
Depends what kind of turbulence. When you're talking about Mother Nature can be unbelievably strong and immediate. Yeah. And we, as pilots, usually, when we see a thing like that, and I'm talking about the weather that we saw there, the kind of cumulonimbus, we call them, that goes all the way up to 50,000 feet, you can have their winds...
It's like a tornado, isn't it?
Yep. You can have their winds that go vertically, and then just a little bit after that, all the way down, because it has to go somewhere, of 200 to 250 knots. Now imagine an airplane goes into one of them and then immediately to the second them. I flew quite a lot in Africa when we're talking about area around the equator. There, because of the centrifugal force, right, the cloud will go even higher and higher and higher. So we saw cloud there at 60,000 feet. Imagine the amount of energy, electrical power, and on top of that, because the winds are going up and down through hot weather down, cold weather up, you have hail. Oh. You can have hail of 4 or 5 inches. You can have hail like that. Now, if a whole lot of hail like that will hit an airplane at 250 or 300 knots, it'll break it. Now, what happened basically there, we don't know yet. Everybody is talking about it, all kind of...
We're actually getting reports now that just one source, the Wall Street Journal, I believe, is reporting that they just found the wreckage of the plane at the bottom of the sea. What will that tell? I mean, that wreckage itself, if indeed was found, what can that tell researchers?
In a nutshell, I'll try to explain what's happening in SAR, Search and Research. And what we're doing, and every country has a kind of investigator. Indonesia has one that works quite well now, at least. Right. But Internet and all those people around that knows everything. They want to know now something that will happen in another half an hour or 5 days. The chief investigator in Israel is talking to all those people in Singapore and Indonesia, in Asia, because everybody wants to know what happened, but the real reason what happened, and not what
Twitter is reporting.
Twitter, exactly. The letters that says, I saw that, of someone who doesn't understand anything, is just the same as a professional airline captain. We have to find the black boxes, and the black boxes say exactly what happened there. We have 2 kind of boxes, you know. But just to add one item to the thing, from whatever we know now, the captain should not have tried to climb up.
Why?
because you cannot outclimb a weather. If the wind downshift is about 200 knots, you're going to go all the way up, but you're going to go down and down and down. Now, if you enter the center of a storm like that, you're going to break up. Now, there is only one small item. If you remember the crash in San Francisco with the Asiana airplane,
right?
That actually went slower and slower and slower. An Israeli or an American, if you say, I want to go left because of weather, and the controller will say, no, I cannot let you go in another 5 minutes. Say, sorry, I'm declaring an emergency. I turn left. In the East, it's a little bit different. And if the captain is a guy who came from the Air Force of 25 years, I don't know. You want somebody to say, yes, you can do it. And no, we in the West, the captain of the airplane will do whatever he wants. He will not ask for permission. Now, this guy somehow went into a cell, into a center of a huge cumulonimbus.
Now, when you're talking about this I'm not going to try and pronounce it. Well, if he went straight into it, but in instances like this, why does the plane even go up in the air? I mean, is there no preliminary information about weather coming your way?
No. The weather is not everywhere.
Clearly.
So when you see whatever it happens, you decided either to go right or to go left. Sometimes the radar instrument itself would not show you what is behind another one.
Yeah.
So you go through one, which is light, and then suddenly you are in the second one. Now, he requested to go left, and they didn't approve. So eventually...
He requested to go to circumvent it.
Exactly. So, and they didn't approve because of some other traffic that were going on. What actually the controller should do is move everybody else if somebody says, I want to go left because of a cell.
Yeah.
But let's wait a little bit.
No,
and
definitely.
We'll find out.
We don't want to theorize about it.
Black boxes tell us everything.
No, it is. It's a terrifying situation, and sadly, you know, it's a horrible thing to say, but at least they found the wreckage, and in some ways, it presents resolution for the family members.
We're talking about the 370.
The 370, exactly. Yeah. But Mr. Kimberly, thank you so much for being with us this morning to try and make sense of this very sad story as we move on. And when we get back, something completely different. We start finishing off this year, 2014. The images that made the year that was. We'll take a look behind the lens. But first, let's hear some more of the morning headlines. Good morning. Thank you for staying with us. I-24 News Morning Edition, December
31st.
How can one forget it? 2014, not for long. I think we've got, in the Middle East, we have about 10 hours? No. How many hours? 10, 9,
8. Actually, you know, the countdown has begun to some electoral political developments in Israel today.
You are such the master transitioner. Tony Grand with the news you missed while scanning the headlines.
It's normal. It's a transitional time of year.
Yes.
You have things like Haaretz, with everything from pictures of, let's see, Putin and a koala. But over on the other side, there it's in Hebrew.
Yeah.
But talking about Netanyahu, the current prime minister today, who's facing former deputy defense minister Danny Danon in the Likud primaries.
Who fired, by the way.
Yeah, they have some chemistry issues. I think it's safe to say. Now, let's just mention that Netanyahu was actually disqualified for a time from actually running in today's primary, but now he actually is back in the game to the glee and not glee of some.
Of some. No, it's an interesting day for internal issues when it comes to them, because he's most likely going to win the leadership, probably, but it's the question of how right-wing will be the rest of the list that will run for the Likud. So, yes, interesting day.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens by tomorrow. And I want to take it back to well, actually, still in this the region, but the United States. Los Angeles Times reported prominently that the Pentagon has disclosed an airstrike against a prominent Somali militant leader. And we're talking about, the Al-Shabaab terrorist group, basically. The Rear Admiral John Kirby did not name the target of the strike, which was just the other day in Somalia, or if the leader had this guy had been killed, but this is 3 months after a very similar attack on a prominent al-Shabaab militant leader. And of course, this is the group that's been kind of terrorizing Kenya at every opportunity. So it's interesting to see.
I'm very glad that this has been, that you bring it to our attention, because we're always talking ISIS, ISIL, al-Baghdadi, forgetting the extreme, also, fundamentalism of the al-Shabaab group in Africa.
And, yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because it actually ties in the way that you mentioned to this next story from Sharq al-Assad, which talks about the Houthi militant group in Yemen, which is seeking control of long-range missiles, and they're eyeing covetously some military bases overlooking Sana'a, which is, I guess you could say, the contested capital of Yemen right now. And some people are saying that the Houthis are actually backed by Iran. They are a Shiite group. The thing that's interesting about these stories is that, as we talk about in the press, the sort of much-trumpeted spring offensive against ISIS, which, if it licks ISIS once and for all, we'll see, but is the next theater for a lot of these kinds of operations about going against the fundamentalist Islamist strains, going to shift to the Yemen area, the Somali area. It's a strategic area.
Strategic area. Yemen always being a hotbed ever since the USS, well, not even before that, by USS Cole, if you remember, in 2005, the terror attack against the USS Cole in Yemen. And that said, I'm listening to this and looking at how, fundamentalism is not just exclusive to ISIS. I think that's people,
sadly.
Sadly, not just exclusive to them. And we're looking at the region leading into 2015. I'm currently quite clinically depressed. But yes.
All right, well, this will cheer you up. Okay. Actually, it won't. The New York Times reports on some developments in Russia with the prominent Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny, who was reported, he's, well, of course, a fierce critic of Putin. He was given a suspended sentence in a fraud case escaped a jail term actually on Tuesday, despite being found guilty of fraud and money laundering. But whether or not there's anything to that, his brother actually was handed a sentence of 3.5 years in jail, in prison, and he was basically crying out in the courtroom, were you trying to punish me through putting my brother in the slammer? And one might say, yeah, they are trying to punish him by putting his brother in the slammer.
I mean, one cannot definitely avoid the crackdown of, the Putin administration if we're looking at anybody who criticizes him. Be it we're theorizing or not, when it's coming out of the Western press. But
and this is a big, also, this Navalny is a very prominent, visible critic. Now you have Pussy Riot coming out again from the woodworks, going after support for him, and it's the kind of thing that Putin, I think, wishes he could just make disappear. But
in this day and age, where the rest of the world is watching, you can't really do that.
And the world is going to be watching this, I think, as we go into the new year as well.
Definitely.
And Hurriyet, Turkish paper. It may or may not be a good time to be a dog in Turkey. Yes. A dog rape suspect has been controversially freed by an animal-abasing judge. Yes. Now, as weird as this may sound, actually, there have been a lot of problems with animal abuse in Turkey in the past year or so, and this has been quite an interesting phenomenon. A suspect who was tried for basically assaulting a dog was acquitted of all charges because the judge said the dog was just a mongrel. So there was a lot of backlash against the judge's categorization of this innocent animal as somehow being less than a pure breed or something. Very strange thing. There's an internet campaign.
We would treat the dog well if it had paper?
Something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So social media campaign actually called hashtag I am the owner of the mongrel has taken off in Turkish Twitter circles.
Second before Erdogan is going to, I was about to say, a second before Erdogan will shut down Twitter yet again.
Yeah, another reason that he might not love the that social media service. But actually, there was video evidence that was actually basically showed that there was an attack in place. But animal rights activists are actually very vocal in Turkey. So we have some hope there.
I'm glad about that. How very, okay.
Let's talk about Exodus.
Please.
Well, you can't watch it in Egypt. Yeah. Now, this story broke last week that Egypt has basically banned Exodus on various grounds.
Because according to Ridley Scott, there are only white people.
No, well, yeah, that's actually they cited a host of reasons, but basically Morocco now has taken up the mantle because they don't like the fact that there's a scene that represents God in the form of a child who gives a revelation to the prophet Moses. So that was one of the things that the Egyptians cited.
God is in the form of a child in the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would make sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, why not, right? But apparently not in
No, I mean,
Egypt.
I have a 2-year-old who thinks she's God. But, yeah.
Well, we all have to find the deity within, right?
The deity within, exactly.
But United Arab Emirates also is one that has now crossed it off their list. And, it's just entertainment.
It's a movie.
But,
I know.
cultural mores in the region where the Bible began
I have issues with the fact that I really think Moses didn't look so good, but that's just me.
Moses, well...
being played by the guy who plays him.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Christian Bale. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, I think Ridley Scott, you can't go wrong. That's my humble opinion. National Post in Canada reports on some interesting stuff going on in British Columbia. Apparently, there's this 103-year-old dam on the Jordan River, not the one in the Middle East. And it's too expensive to rebuild, so they're warning residents to get ready to just get out in 10 minutes or die. So,
Did it come in the form of a text?
I don't know. But I mean, it's pretty awful stuff, but, you got some particularly...
was that seriously get out in 10 minutes or die?
Well, it's one of the most seismically active regions in the entire world.
Oh, my God.
Especially in Canada. But they're having some issues getting those people to move.
To move.
They like their area.
Yeah,
and,
so we're just going to give you a time limit. Like, move now.
Yeah, get ready to go fast when the rains come in.
Yeah, lovely.
Princess Diana.
Really quick.
Okay, the Times of London reports that the BBC has ditched Princess Diana documentary, which was going to sort of say that there was a lot of spin involved in trying to rehabilitate Prince Charles's image after the death of Diana. So palace advisors were not taking a shine to this documentary. No longer going to be seen on the BBC. But quite compelling subject matter, one could say.
I mean, I'm sure it's going to actually, if it's like the interview, we can see it in other places. It's going to be streaming.
Yeah.
I don't think the North Koreans will have an issue with that. Okay, Tony, stick with us as we move along. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, then, under that assertion, we are very pleased to have you in studio, Ya'akov Peri, Reuters Jerusalem Bureau Senior Photo Editor.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. You seem a little scared, but Tony and I do that to people. It's like we have that tendency. And I'm so happy to have you with us because Reuters, one of our, and we of course are big fans of Reuters, has done an amazing job this year when it comes to iconic and images that came out throughout 2014. So, you're here to talk about Reuters' best photos of this past year. Let's look at the next clip that shows 2014 in pictures and take it from there. Wow, Sean, Reuters senior photo editor in Jerusalem, in your Jerusalem bureau, looking at, amazing pictures, one after the other. Sadly, this was also a year that had a lot of wars in it. But as a photo editor, we're always wondering, you probably get hundreds of pictures from every photographer from the field when they sent out. How does one pick a picture that you look at and you say, this is the image, this is something that can be iconic, this is the one that's going to lead the fray?
Well, first of all, most of the time the photographer does an initial edit,
right?
Because he's actually the one in the field. In our case, I'm saying he because they're all males.
No. But there are women
yes,
photographers.
There are,
and amazing ones.
And so we work from that usually, and that's a typical day. You try to pick the picture that's the most newsworthy. That tells the story in the most real and depicts the situation in the way that a person who doesn't necessarily know what's going on can really sense the
when
scene.
I'm thinking of what you're saying just now, because I'm looking at the clip that we've compiled of the Reuters pictures, that when it comes to war, some of the most iconic pictures, war or conflict, it's always children. Because that sells the, I mean, I don't want to say sell, but it's children within those conflicts that usually move the point, you know, past the point along stronger. Am I right in saying that?
I think sometimes, when people see pictures of children in a horrible situation or in a situation of mourning or sadness, then it may have a different
effect on them. But you yourself also picked them up.
But I don't think that's a reason for picking a picture as opposed to a different picture.
No, clearly not. I mean, I'm assuming that I always, when I look at that, when I see children in conflict situation, that, you know, drives the point home. But you yourself, as an editor, you have images that you think that were the images that made your year in many ways, right?
Yeah, there were some pictures from the ones that you showed that I felt were the strongest.
Let's take a look at one.
A variety of images.
If we can take a look at one that you picked, that came our way. That's coming away, I think. Yeah, there we go. Okay. What is this? This is
from Africa. Siegfried. He was in a situation that this, I think, to me is a news picture in its truest form. He was actually there when the news event was happening. A very difficult and
Central African Republic, the actual, I mean, the bloodshed that went on there, and I think not too often we get, you know, in the media enough information on how bloody, you know, the wars and how bloody the conflicts in Africa are. This drives the story home in many ways.
Very terrible situation.
Did that knife fall? Hate to ask.
Yeah, no.
Do we know?
I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know.
I hope not, but
I just know from what Siegfried tells about the picture
that
he was there. He was there for a very short amount of time because he didn't feel that it was a safe place to stay in for very long.
Yeah.
And he took the pictures, and
I think it just also drives home the amazing work the photographers do in the field and the situation that they're in. Let's take a look at another one.
Okay. This is a picture taken in Ukraine.
Donetsk.
It's actually a portrait, what we like to call a portrait, because this is a pro-Russian protester. He's actually posing for the picture. But I like the simplicity of the picture, and
it's almost like a painting in many ways.
Yes, he's in all black.
The yellow chair.
The yellow chair, which doesn't necessarily look new. Looks like it's been around.
And there's something also, you know, I'm thinking out loud with you. Tell me if I'm wrong. There's also something in the way he's sitting.
Yes,
I own
with his leg.
Exactly.
His leg on the armchair,
which goes to the point of the pro-Russian.
So sometimes
forces.
Simplicity also can really add a lot to a picture, and I feel like
in the short time that we have, I'm just, you know, one of the top 10 pictures this year was the selfie that Ellen DeGeneres, and we have very little time, but I'm looking at that, and I'm thinking for photographers who go to places like Donetsk, who go to places like Central Africa, risk their lives, bring out these images that really bring the story home, and then the audience around the world picks this as one of the main images of the year, shot by a cell phone. You know, what does that make photographers feel?
Well, I think this picture has an entertainment value for the public, but I don't think it can be compared to news pictures. I think that everybody has now a camera on their iPhone
and a filter,
and they can take pictures. But I know for Reuters we maintain our ethical guidelines throughout, and we do deal with, you know, getting pictures sometimes from a passerby from a spot news event, and we have to, you know, make sure it's legitimate. We have to. So it makes our work a little bit harder because it's not our photographers in the field, but
it is something. It brings the image back, but the work that the photographers are doing is amazing. Shawn, thank you so much for being with us today. When we get back, 2014 almost over, we take a closer look at the stories that made it, the stories behind those images, and made it the year that it was. First, though, let's get some more of the morning headlines. welcome back. It is still Wednesday, December 31st, 2014. Clearly not for long. This is still the morning edition. I'm still Yael Levi. Last I checked, and thank you for staying with us. Wars, a formidable terror foe that rises, a lethal disease that spreads, disappearing planes, legalizations, elections, and a dumped bucket of ice water going viral. On the web, pardon me, are just some of the stories that made 2014 the year that it was. And as it is drawing to an end in less than 12 hours, at least here in the Middle East, I'm joined in the studio by a panel of distinguished journalists, the best in their field. Russia Today's Middle East Bureau Chief Paula Slier, good morning to you. Walla News diplomatic correspondent Amir Tibon, good morning to you. Good morning. Our very own one and only senior web editor Ruthie Sinai. Good morning. And the irreplaceable Daniel Roth of The Economy magazine. Thank you all for being with me. Before we break this year down, let's take a look at the following clip highlighting the year's top news stories.
Никто меня не свергнул. Я вынужден был покинуть Украину под непосредственной угрозой своей жизни и жизни своих близких.
هذه بشرى نزفها لشعبنا الفلسطيني في الوطن والشتات.
Today I authorized 2 operations in Iraq.
The accused is found not guilty.
The year that was 2014 with our journalists in studio. I would love to start actually with Paula Slier of Bureau Chief Russia Today. I want to ask you, and you know, actually this is something I said to Amir Tibon, who's also with us in studio a week ago, that this year had so many horrific stories, and sadly all of them are kind of open-ended. And it was Ruthie Sinai who said 2014 is the kind of to be continued. You know, it was the prequel to things that are not finished. And one of the stories that you picked, we've asked each of you to pick, you know, stories that made the year or that were most important to you, is the rise of ISIS that I think, you know, can be almost, you know, highlighted as the story of the year. How did that come about even?
Well,
I know, take us back there.
Well, I think maybe a year ago, not so many people had even heard of ISIS, and now you have them declaring a caliphate in Iraq and Syria. It's still unclear exactly how much territory they control because it changes so much. They are the richest terrorist organization that there is. In October, it was estimated they have something like $2 billion. That number might have decreased as advances, particularly by people on the ground, are made against ISIS. But still, it's a force to be reckoned with. And the reports we're receiving now is as an added means of revenue. They're involved in human trafficking and organ harvesting. Now, when I was there in northern Iraq, and I was also on the border with Syria just a month and a half ago, you know, you can't actually explain the terror and the fear that people fear. I mean, one can well imagine it, but there's no sense on the ground that the U.S. airstrikes are actually achieving anything. And we've heard from the Pentagon that something like $1 billion have been spent in the campaign of the airstrikes, and yet there's no indication that the amount of territory that ISIS controls today is any less than it was in the past. In fact, the advances against the group are people on the ground, are your Kurds, are your local fighters, your local forces. You have a huge refugee problem over there. The situation on the ground is so horrific, and the stories we hear about the killings and the beheadings and the sex slavery.
The stories that we hear when it comes to also journalists, and I think all of you will agree with me that, you know, it's one of the stories that is the hardest story to cover in modern history, because you can't really go. We've seen what happens to journalists on the ground.
It's an impossible story to cover, and one of the questions that we ask as journalists is who sets the agenda in terms of covering the ISIS story. You know, ISIS will release video footage, and we as mainstream media will put it on air. But are we not actually doing their own propaganda for them? And yet the alternative for us to go to those areas is impossible. Journalists can't travel there. And then if you take Kobani, I'd like to use Kobani as an example. It's a town on the Syrian-Turkish border.
Battles that have not really been resolved yet.
They haven't been resolved, and there's talk of a genocide. But my point is that Kobani is just one example. There's many examples of what's happening in other cities and towns across Syria and Iraq. And why don't we talk about them? Simply because we don't have the exposure. Not that we as Western journalists are able to go to Kobani, but we're able to go to the border of Syria and Turkey and stand with Kobani in the distance and say, well, here behind us, this is happening. But it's very disproportionate coverage in terms of what ISIS is doing on the ground. And they have such a sophisticated media operation that we're almost becoming culprits in helping them to further.
We are becoming the story in many, many ways. And then, you know, when I'm looking at that and the stories that you specifically picked, the rise of ISIS, which clearly is a story that it not trickles but moves straight into 2015. There was another regional war in the Middle East, sadly, I think the third round, and that would be Protective Edge, where we're sitting right now, Tel Aviv, a city that was targeted, but not also to mention Gaza, pummeled throughout the summer. And it's the 50 days of Israel's Gaza operation that I think all of us will agree was humongous, correct? I mean, looking at that, your take on a war as such, this is also the third time you've covered Gaza? The Gaza operation?
It is the third time, although I did cover this time from inside Israel, and we had a correspondent in Gaza, but in the past I have covered inside Gaza. It's a very difficult story to cover as well. I mean, Israeli journalists don't have access to going into Gaza. Those foreign colleagues of mine who were inside Gaza, many of them admitted afterwards that their hands were held in terms of being able to report sometimes that Hamas was actually firing from areas where there were civilians. They were not really allowed to do that, and if they did, they were kicked out. You have now both sides being accused of war crimes. Israel being accused of massive civilian deaths. You had something like 2,200, of which something between 50 and 75% are claimed to have been civilians. Israel's accused of using disproportionate force. Hamas, for its side, is accused of using the civilian population from where to fire. So you have that as a concern. If you look at how journalists covered it, I also think that there's a lot of sympathy, as there has been consistently for quite some time, to the Palestinian side of the story. And I work in the foreign media, and there's a lot of criticism that continues to be leveled at Israel. And it's almost like I've been in the region now for 9 years. It's almost like we constantly go around in circles in terms of questions being asked, when will be the next Gaza war? The experts and the analysis is that Gaza is already rebuilding tunnels that were destroyed, that some of the reconstruction aid that's coming into Gaza is again being used to rebuild those tunnels. So the question many are asking is, perhaps that operation is just a matter of time until it repeats itself.
Until the next one comes up. And also it's the Operation Israel Security, I think, is something that led us to what is becoming the big story in Israel over the course of the next several months. And that is the aftermath of that war, the security arguments, but also what happened to the Israeli government after it. And that would be Prime Minister Netanyahu actually, and Amir Tibon, I'm gesturing to you, is actually calling for elections earlier this month, which many will say, is a result of what happened in the last several months in Israel. Let's hear what Prime Minister Netanyahu had to say at the beginning of this month before he, handed us the next story that will dominate Israel, at least for the next several months.
One thing that Lapid and Livni have in common is their conduct. They crow about new politics, but in effect they practice classic old politics. Over the past few weeks, they colluded to approach the religious parties in an attempt to depose a prime minister while serving in the cabinet. These are the same parties that Lapid regularly claims he refuses to sit in a government with, as they themselves will attest to. A finance minister who failed at managing the economy conspires in the dark with the justice minister in order to sabotage the government and the person who stands at its head.
Amir Tibon, Walla's diplomatic correspondent. The putsch. The putsch speech, definitely. Netanyahu being one of the, I would say, the leading figures of 2014.
Oh, absolutely, I think. There's no doubt. And Israel was the main news story in 2014, I think, on the international level. Not just the Gaza war, but also what happened before it, which was the failed American peace negotiations led by American Secretary of State John Kerry. That was actually a big news story. If you go back almost a year ago to January, February of 2014, there was this notion that maybe something is moving, maybe something is happening inside closed rooms, or if I will borrow Netanyahu's language about the putsch, behind closed doors. There was almost a conspiracy led by an American Secretary of State that Israel will accept the 1967 borders as a basis for the future Palestinian state. And Netanyahu was very close to accepting it. He will fiercely deny any hint of it today, but at the time, he was very close to accepting it. And then everything fell apart because of the mistrust between the two leaders, Mr. Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, and because of the building in the settlements during the negotiations that caused a very problematic atmosphere for it, and because of tactical mistakes made by the Americans and the Israelis and the Palestinians. And that eventually, I think, led us to what we saw in the summer.
Ruthie, I'm moving to you as well, just because we don't have much time, and all these stories are incredibly crucial, but we have Netanyahu, we have Israel, we have the wars. There was another, story that broke out, and I think amazed all of us, and that would be Ebola. But you and I met this morning, and you came up with a story that is horrific for the end of 2014, and that's from the United States, isn't it?
It's it's strange because you end the year as you begin. If you remember, in January of 2014, we had that horrible case of the mass shooting in school in Connecticut, Sandy Hook, with 26 kids killed. And today, in Idaho, a kid who's sitting in his mother's shopping cart rummages around in her purse. His mother is going around shopping with the other kids, takes out a gun and shoots her dead. He's 2.
Yeah. Gun control in the United States, I think, sadly nothing is going to be resolved this year as well. I'm sorry to sound pessimistic, but, we're looking at that and the year that wasn't violence. But speaking of that, it was also, nature, or be it, viruses that confronted us, and that's Ebola that came out of nowhere. So to speak.
So to speak. Well, the bats are to blame. These
the bats.
Exactly. I think one of the problems with these stories that break out of nowhere, whether it's Ebola or the Gaza war, which I think many in the world were surprised about, but also Israeli citizens, is that usually the news coverage today, we are sometimes so busy, and I know it's lame to blame us, the journalists, but let's do some kind of maybe thinking about our past. Yeah. We are so busy reporting the breaking news and the day-to-day and the small events that sometimes a bigger picture is missing. I'm sure that there were many people to whom the Ebola breakout in Africa was not such a big surprise. And obviously, I think people reporting the diplomatic situation between Israel and the Palestinians, or the situation inside Gaza, the humanitarian situation there, or the connections in the Arab world between Hamas and Turkey and Egypt, maybe we're less surprised about Gaza, but these stories, these more complex stories, less breaking news stories, don't reach the mass audiences today, and That is why sometimes we're so surprised.
But Ebola was a local story. I mean, it was a local story until it started spreading.
Until it started spreading. But speaking of spreading...
so was ISIS, by the way.
And so was, exactly,
ISIS was a local story until journalists were beheaded.
Daniel, I have not forgotten about you. We have a minute to tell us about how Russia's economy is sinking. Paula, no offense.
Russia's economy is sinking.
Yes.
From the economic perspective, the decline of oil prices, which is at the root, it's one of the two main roots of Russia's economic woes. The decline of oil prices is the big story. It's at the backbone of all the stories we're talking about. It's the flow of people and information and money. It's at the backbone of ISIS. It's
responsible for many of the wars that we're witnessing right now.
Yeah.
How is that gonna change in the next year?
There's some people hopeful saying oil prices can't stay low, particularly oil-producing countries are saying oil prices can't stay low. It's entirely possible that they will stay low for the duration of next year, stay too low for many of these oil-producing countries to feel at ease. So we may find that this is the big backbone of 2015.
I could do this for another hour, and sadly all the time we have, with the 30 seconds that we have, let's hope for peace in the Middle East. But that said, before we continue and get back with the pop culture news that was this year and drink some alcohol on the air, let's hear some more of the morning headlines. Good morning. Welcome back to I-24 Morning Edition, December 30. First. Thank you. 2014 is about to end. With me in studio, raising their glasses, is, of course, Tony Grant, the one and only.
Cheers.
Amen. For anything that is important this year, Netta Achitov, environmental guru, Mirav Sevilla, sport guru, and Ronnie Stav, culture pop guru. There we go. So raise your glass. We don't drink yet. It's like Passover. I say what we do. Okay, we put it down. We're going to drink at the end.
Oh, no.
But this is the panel of the year that was, and everything that really mattered. And that's why we're going to start with Ronnie Stav.
Oh, wow.
Right. And you should. Yes, and we'll go to a little clip of the thing that almost caused World War III. Hold on. We're going to start with something different. A little bird tells me in my ear. So, you had the most important news for you this year was what?
All right. So, I think we can all talk, like, Tony will obviously talk about it, but I feel like Mirav can talk about it too. Kim Kardashian breaks the internet. It was just one thing that we should all talk about. But, salute to that. L'chaim.
Okay. Here's the but. Amen. Yes.
But.
Yes.
There we go. But. I don't want to talk about Kim K. I actually want to talk about the objectification of women through this.
Sadly,
Papers magazine. Yeah, we're actually getting serious. I get so philosophical with this whole thing. I felt like New Year's resolution with those ideas. So basically, Kim K is doing what she knows how to do best, take her clothes off. Totally legit. That's her thing. Like, she got published for it, and she keeps on doing it. And as long as she's owning her own body, I'm totally fine with that. She's saying sex sells, and just like Miley Cyrus, she's saying, I'm okay with that.
And we should be able to do that without men immediately wanting to rape us. See, I mean, I put it out there that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Laugh Who Laughs Last, she's making a ton of money over the fact that we have something to say about her bottom.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, when we talk about it, it's basically, so it's the culture of nothing. It's not really culture. There's nothing into it. If we talk about the photograph itself, it's a remake by the photographer Jean-Paul Good, and it's a remake of a photo from 1976 of Caroline Baumet. Am I saying it right?
All I know is that he was Grace Jones's boyfriend.
Oh, okay.
So,
Perfect.
talking
that too.
about,
Sure. So it was such an important photo. It has such a political, strong statement. And now Kim K is doing this picture and nothing.
All we're discussing is
first model was an Afro-American.
And with her ponytail going all the way up, you could have seen in the shadow some people that are not so good of a fans of African Americans. They kind of wear a sheet on their head. You could see it in the shadow.
The metaphors that were behind that picture.
So such a strong photo. And Jean-Paul Good actually did the remake as well. And to know that he did something that is so insignificant, that was what was hard for me. And to take about the stolen naked photos, I just have to say it, the objectification of women. Like, it's one thing to say, I own my own body, I'm gonna take it and do whatever I want with it and make money out of it. It's a whole different thing to take someone else's body and say, now I owe you. Own you. Yeah.
Yes. No. Completely true.
Yes.
And it's like, I'm not going to finish this on a depressing note. I do think, though, that in many ways, 2015 did enable us women, and Tony, you're outnumbered. So 2014 did enable us women to speak more, to be more vocal.
Absolutely.
And the glass ceiling is definitely still there. We haven't broken it, but it's leading us some. It is moving step by step.
Step by step.
That said, the interview.
Yes. So, I mean...
before you start, has anybody here seen it?
I've seen it.
Yeah,
Seriously?
I've seen it.
How bad is it?
I liked it.
No.
I liked it. You know what? They did a very good job. I really like their humor. It's stupid humor, but they did a really good job of doing it. I actually sat there and I laughed the entire time, and I enjoyed it. Absolutely.
How drunk
It is. It's entertaining. I wasn't. I actually was not.
Are you shocked? You're the first person I hear saying that, because everybody says that.
I've heard it from a lot of people. Listen, it's stupid humor, but if you don't like stupid humor, you shouldn't watch this in the beginning.
But it's stupid humor. Should it spark World War III?
Yes. It should not. It should not spark World War III. It went way too far. But I, as a fan of also both James Franco and Seth Rogen, I really enjoyed it.
Well, I'll drink to that.
And there we go. Amen. That was the interview. Speaking of the interview. Speaking of the interview.
Yes.
Okay. So that did not cause World War III. Really, that said, before we continue with the interview, we will get back to it. I haven't stopped you yet.
All right.
It's just that Netta here is beaming with environmental news.
Yes.
Right. Was it a good year for the environment?
Yes, it was a great year for the environment.
First time I've heard Netta say anything optimistic.
Optimistic. So we have two really big things that made it good. Actually, three. The World Cup, it's actually a sport event, but everybody was talking about the environment in Brazil, the Amazon forest.
True. We're going to get there also,
Yes, so we'll get there. I'll hold my horses about that. Next good thing was the biggest march in September all over the world for climate change. People were walking in New York, in Bogota, in Paris, London, Berlin, wherever you want, and calling their leaders, please do something about the environment. We really want you to do something.
I'm wondering out loud with you, just because, I have you in studio once a week, but that it feels that the environment is on the agenda more so than it was in recent years, that it feels so to me. But is it actually the case?
Yes, I think this is the proof that, people were actually marching, going out of their house and marching and calling, world leaders to change the way we look at it. World Cup is a sports event, and everybody was talking about the environment there. And Lima, the resolutions there, they were quite nice. And another good thing...
to be ratified, so in many ways. Okay.
And there are many success stories. Also, like campaigns that went really well. The whaling is the biggest one. Japan is going to cut 2/3 of the whales. It's hunting, all over the seas. So we have also success stories, and whales was a big issue this year. One not very successful story,
of course,
is the hunting in Africa of rhinoceros, elephants. This is a war that we still need to fight.
But you're hopeful when it comes to the environment.
I am hopeful, Okay.
Sports-wise...
We're starting with the World Cup. We're going right back to Brazil.
Yay!
Sure.
I mean, it's been such a year for sports, 2014, that somebody actually had to remind me that Sochi did happen this year. Because you completely forget. Sochi happened this year. So I'm not the only one. That's great.
Yes! I completely forgot about
Sochi was this year, but... I'm not even going to talk about that. There's so much else that happened. We're going to go right to the World Cup. Obviously, a big event, not only for the environment, but for football itself around the world. True. And so much has happened. I just remember being back then at end of June, beginning of July, and being so excited about it because all the games in the first round were just unbelievable in the houses. Everybody was scoring. But I think the thing everybody remembers from this is the 7-1 thrashing that Germany gave Brazil on their home turf. It was an unbelievable game.
I'm sorry, I'm
You're celebrating again.
Yes. That was an amazing game. I want to tell you that I had just given birth. Let's talk about me. I had just given birth, and the baby was on whatnot, and I couldn't stay up because I was so tired. But all I remember is my husband from the living room yelling, "Another one!"
There was that 6-minute stretch where they just kept on soaring. So when you saw in the Brazilians' eyes, not only the players but the fans, but aside from that game, it was a major stage for goalies in the World Cup. So many players came on a major stage. James Rodriguez, players that you may have not heard of or the common man has not heard of.
Tony and I talk about him every day.
About James Rodriguez? Probably not for his football skills, but that's the World Cup was the biggest event this year. That was absolutely everything is nothing compared to it. And it's one of those things that you remember. I remember where I was the day that Germany thrashed Brazil. Unfortunately, it was also towards the beginning of some activity here in Israel. But that's we do remember where we were on those days.
Parallel with the war. But no, definitely one of those moments. And it's interesting that you say that because it's always where were you when Kennedy was shot? None of you were planned.
Are we that old?
Yeah, no, we're not.
Okay.
Not yet. Don't worry. But it's it's that kind of story. And sadly, of course, even in sports, I think the story that dominated the news worldwide is obviously Pistorius.
Yes, and I think the world was still in shock, and we're still harping on it now that we know that they will appeal his case. It's not over yet. We could be talking about this in a year, in 2015.
We have also, when it comes to Pistorius, we have a little clip to remind us exactly what happened there. Let's take a look.
The accused is found not guilty and is discharged. Instead, he is found guilty of culpable homicide.
News-wise, it's hard for me to say this, when I just saw myself with a big thing in my head. But news-wise, I think one of the things that was compelling about the story was the black judge. Absolutely. The black judge that actually handed down this,
and
this
South Africa, that's an even bigger story.
Yeah,
and that's absolutely.
Yeah.
And now the question is, how will he deal with being in jail? He was hoping to get out by August and be on house arrest. With the appeal, it doesn't look that way. Obviously, a double amputee in a South African jail. They were talking about how it could be so difficult for him, more than the average person, because he's a double amputee. So this is still an ongoing story that we're going to continue talking about into the new year.
Definitely until the new year, and one that came from, when it comes to sports, it was a left fielder for the news of sports. Speaking of left fields. I'd like to raise. Listen, we have to raise a glass to Tony, who actually gives us.
Have you seen his suit?
I know. Have you seen the tie?
I have to say, it's a Greek-Israeli hybrid. Like me. Yes. Okay. Bringing all the Mediterranean together.
It's bringing it all down. So, but for Tony, I have to put the glasses on because the year that wasn't the web, and as you said, Ronnie Stav with Kim Kardashian's butt. I actually think that maybe we have to get Kim Kardashian into the environmental campaign, and it's going to work much better.
Yeah, she needs to do something constructive. But you know who did do something constructive?
We'll take that. But the year that wasn't web, and what goes on?
Well, in terms of just celebrity stuff, I'm glad that Roni mentioned the celebrity hacks of the nude photos and all that awful stuff. But on the good side, we had Rihanna, who actually did emerge, I believe, as the sort of seductive pop culture icon of the year. Now, case in point,
I have to tell just the girls in the studio, because I sit with you. You know that he's a huge Rihanna fan.
Well, I'm a part of her Navy.
He's part of her Navy.
Yes.
He signed up to the Navy. Okay, so Rihanna.
I used to wear Rogue Man, her new fragrance, but I switched to
Rogue Man by Rihanna.
Listen, she did a charity event actually in honor of her grandparents. It was December 11th in Los Angeles. It's something that someone like Kim Kardashian has yet to go into that sort of social awareness phase. But she forgot, or she didn't forget, to actually go half topless after the event, as that picture shows.
Whoa!
In a tasteful way. It didn't break the internet, but she's kind of emerged.
She also headed a campaign for topless photos on Instagram. We were talking about that earlier.
She's pushing the envelope with social media.
Free the nipple?
Yeah.
Were you with me on the free the nipple?
Yeah, it's important stuff. It's a message of empowerment. Now,
I promise you I will never free my nipple.
Okay, well, not here. But I want to go back to Kim Kardashian for a moment, because she's leaving 2014 with a new way to get mad at her, because she said that the reason why she never smiles in pictures is because it causes wrinkles.
Oh, come on.
Okay, listen, Yeah, it's hard to get behind her, right? I mean, it's just, she's got a great, but, you know, it's hard to get.
Yeah,
That's
like, are you a real
annoying.
person? Do you really think half of the stuff you're saying, just half? Or is it just like huge PR?
Exactly, and she gets,
Phenomenal.
No, because that to me spells let's objectify women and never get old. Right?
Yes.
You know, that's basically what it means.
Oh gosh, you know, Alicia. I want to say Alicia Keys. When she went topless, she was pregnant and doing it for peace. Look at that picture. That didn't break the internet, but it made some ripples. And you know, I think she did.
You know what I love about that is because pieces for the future generations, and something that sadly 2014 is not looking very optimistic as the year that was setting up peace.
Yeah. So you know, we got to think peace, and of course, who's a big champion of peace? Madonna. Let's not forget that she also...
You're Rihanna's Navy, but you're Madonna's bodyguard.
I am her Marines and Air Force and all the rest of it. Now, she did Interview. Look at that.
Yes.
You know, there's a lot of controversy right now because her...
Beautiful.
Well, you know,
it does. Okay.
It's painful to be the queen of pop.
Yes.
I want her to say free the nipple because I feel like she has to go there.
She freed them long ago, you know.
I want to talk about women and their age, and she's 50...
Ageless. No, she's like 56.
56?
Yes.
Wow. And you look at these pictures, and granted, I think somebody she was on Vogue, and one of the photo editors there said, which paper it was, that nothing on her body was Photoshopped, which I find hard to believe, but...
That was the Versace campaign.
That was the Versace campaign.
Would you believe Donatella?
I would believe Donatella. But, you know, quickly when it comes to this is the year that was...
Ben Affleck's penis.
Yes!
Yes! It finally got the attention it so deserved. Not from me or anyone I know, but apparently from the Gone Girl whole thing. You know, you were like looking at it if you were watching the movie.
I saw a clip on it online because I have to admit I am shallow as the rest of them. I wanted to see Ben Affleck's penis. It's very hard to decipher anything out there. I urge you all to find it online.
But there was it was just a flash view.
It's kind
like,
of a flash view.
Yeah, it was like a shower scene. I didn't see it, but did you see
that
it?
and I think that went viral and the ice bucket went viral this year. And if you combine the two, you know, you can say many things about Ben Affleck's penis, but I want to ask you this. We're raising our glasses. We've got several seconds after this show. And as we go around the table, Ronnie, what are you wishing for this year?
Ooh.
Quickly.
Sorry. World peace.
Amen.
Miss America. Over here is asking for world peace.
Can I have this? No, but growth. For everyone to create some sort of personal growth.
Miran.
Everybody be happy with themselves.
Amen.
Good year for the animals.
Good year for the animals. Tony.
A peace and a joint Madonna Rihanna billing in Tel Aviv within 3 months.
Within 3 months.
With front row tickets.
Yes. Amen to that. I-24 is morning edition, folks. Have a wonderful, wonderful year. Check us tomorrow. It'll be 2015. L'chaim. Let's bring.